if you try and rip the world apart. Someone will always put it back together.
One of our favorite game franchises here that has been our favorite for almost decades is the Deus Ex series. They provided an alternative to the traditional RPGs that really wasn't there yet. We got to see a revamp of that with the previous Deus Ex. Now the new game is coming out very, very soon this year, Deus Ex Mankind Divided, and I'm speaking with Jean-Francois, the game director of Deus Ex. He's taken some time to chat with me. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
So just to introduce people to the game, you know, the elevator pitch, if you were, what are the Deus Ex games all about?
Well, it's a action RPG series in which you play the role of someone that unravel worldwide conspiracies, and it's a game that is all about choices and consequences.
And this time around, we are going to be given that sense of choice in a really big way. Speaking with the main lead actor, he talked about a lot on this show before. How does the role of choice really work in this dystopian universe?
Well, what we always try to do, like I was just saying with the elevator pitch, like choice and consequence is a big part of the game. No matter what subject we're exploring, what is really important to us is to put the player in the middle of all these challenges and those moral decisions and whatnot, and letting the player really experiment with the game. So what is really important is to feel that when you do something, that the world reacts to what you just did, and then we live by that. So it can go from talking with someone, and depending on how you deal with the person you're talking to, and it will affect how that person reacts back to you. Or if you go and you try to meet someone, confront someone, and you have to deal with, let's say, the people protecting that person. If you didn't kill anyone, or you did kill people, like you will have this person, when you meet that person, she's going to react to you in a different way. Or it can also be with, let's say, you meet someone and someone proposes you a deal, and you shake hands with that person or not, and depending on if you do it or you don't do it, it's going to change a lot of beats during the adventure and whatnot. So for us, it's really a question of making sure that as much as we can, like giving you feedback and giving you some consequences to about everything you do.
Like you said there, the idea of consequence is very, very important when it comes to these games. The circumstance that you just talked about, whether or not you kill any of the characters and meet your targets, how do you make that impact affect the story more than maybe one or two different dialogue branches at the beginning, and then it's exactly the same regardless? Because you see that a lot in games where they give you some choice and there's a quick, oh, cool, this guy knows what I did, but wait a second, it's exactly the same, series of responses. So what are you guys doing, I guess, to stand out in terms of that?
Well, it depends, because we have different level of choices with different level of consequences. And of course, we have some consequences that are just to give flavor, like the world is reacting, is acknowledging what you just did, right? So it's still part of it, and sometimes it doesn't go beyond that, I think. But nevertheless, it's important, even though it's very shallow in a way, because it makes the game, the game knows what you did, and it talks back to you, so it reflects more on your personal choices, and therefore you have a more intimate relationship with the game. But that is just one level. If all the choices would be like that, I agree with you. It would be like, okay, cool, but in the end, it doesn't change much, right? So it's it's not a striking balance, but it's trying to hit the right balance to have those more flavor-esque choices with consequences, and the ones where it's going to lead you into other territories that or not, depending on how you dealt with certain situations. So when it comes to that, our goal is always we're always looking at the challenges that the player is going to face and what kind of encounters is going to have and everything. And we're looking, okay, what if the player does this and he wants to do that? Okay, so what would be the consequences to that or to that? And then we just brainstorm and we go on. And we have some of the choices in the game they can class it's something that you can do early on in the game, and you can be almost towards the end of the game and still living the repercussions of the early choices. So what we do to ensure that it's not shallow, it's some of the choices, we really fully explore them. The ones that are going to have a ramification on the direct story or in parallel with the main story, affecting the main story at the same time. And one of the way we achieve that is that all our choices are custom built in the sense that we're not doing it from a systemic approach. Of course, we do it from a systemic approach in terms of do you play stealth, do you play combat, and it's going to react like this, like that. We have that, but in terms of narrative, to make them more meaningful, to craft them in a way that it can have very interesting effects. We're really fleshing those choices out. I would say by hand. We're not just doing it's a system. It's trying to be a simulation of this and that, and then it pans out consequences. We're not doing that. I mean, depending which kind of game you're making, that kind of approach would make sense. But with the Deus Ex experience, that is not totally open experience, but it's not totally a linear experience. We're kind of in between. I do believe it's really important that we flesh those moments as much as we can. So therefore, you have a very particular experience. That being said, going into fully branching consequences, we would produce the game for years to come, because in the end, we cannot build 300 different stories for the 300 different minds out there thinking differently. So even more, I should say. We're talking about millions, not hundreds.
Well, that's the line, right? It's about making content that's interesting, but also thinking about how many people are actually going to get, the stealth, never touching anyone, never hurting anyone gameplay, and should they get a whole new story because of that? It's a difficult thing, because I imagine a lot of your fan base really wants that stuff, but you only have so many resources.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing I like to say is that we have one big story, but how that story is being told to you will differ from player to player according to their the different choices they will make along the game. So all of us will have overall the same story, but how it's going to be told to us or how it's going to be experienced will be different. So that's what I like to say, because in the end, we just said trying to encompass all the possibilities and going in different directions, we would never complete the game.
Again, speaking with Jean-Francois, game director of Deus Ex, all about the upcoming title, Mankind Divided. There was a little bit of controversy with the previous title about the ending. We've talked a lot about choice so much, and clearly that's a huge focus this time around. Are we going to be faced, and there's a little bit of a spoiler if you haven't played the other games, with a similar sort of ending in which the consequences are a choice of press a button sort of thing, the magic box type of thing that a lot of people didn't enjoy, but it's people create stories, and I think a lot of times it's about the journey, maybe not about the destination, but this time around, what is your perspective on how to develop an ending for Deus Ex?
Well, for me, if I look back at Human Revolution, there are two aspects to the endings. There was, you referred to the button a button pressing choice kind of thing, and there are also the endings themselves, which were kind of like footage of real life with just a voiceover and everything. With the button system at the end, it was not our original idea. Our original idea was that depending on which of the endings or which one of the philosophies you wanted to support, you were supposed to have challenges along the way that would make you fight for that idea, and therefore you would have had time to really, as you go through the challenge, really think, is it really where I want things to go or not, kind of thing. Unfortunately, as the production was wrapping up, we didn't have the time we wanted to fulfill our vision, because sometimes it's like, I'm just explaining that right now, it sounds simple, but sometimes like just producing it's not as simple. And so in the end, we couldn't achieve the vision of how we wanted that portion to unfold, and we decided to go with the button thing, because like you said, like at this point it was all about the journey. The story was over, and at this point in time, anyway, no matter what would have been that gameplay sequence, the endings would have been the same no matter what, because at that point, what I wanted to do something polarizing. I wanted to do something that either you totally embrace and love or you hate, but you're not in between. And with the I would say the historical footage and the voiceover, some people totally loved it, and they were like, "Oh my God, this is so great!" And they were thinking about stuff, and it made them realize things. And you had another portion of our audience that they were like, "Oh, I hate when games don't show you what's happening next," or whatever like that. And to me, in the end, whether you hated it or you loved it, I'm happy, because I wanted something that would have an impact on the audience. And
you got what you wanted then, right?
I got what I wanted, seriously. Yeah, and because when I look, like when we had the stats, I think it was like 50% of our audience thought it was brilliant, and 50% of our audience thought it sucked.
Well, hey, it's interesting to ride that line, and it's cool that now you're looking at it, and it's cool. A little tidbit, if you're a fan of the previous games, to know what you guys had planned and just the realities of game development. There's one other mechanic that I wanted to know, and I think we talked about this last time we spoke, if it'll continue this time around. I love playing these games pure pacifist. I think it's fascinating to use the tools and the systems to create that. I love systems that work in games, and Deus Ex has some of the best systems. I remember in the first game, though, I would work so hard to perfect my systems and have to throw that out the door as soon as a big bad boss fight came. And they were important because they were narratively structured. You wanted to interact. This time around, how are you making sure there's not that dissonance of, Adam Jensen played one way the entire game, and now he has to grab a rocket launcher? How do you do that?
I knew where you were going.
Yeah.
I heard that bosses were not our biggest achievement last time.
It was, and that's the thing. I wouldn't necessarily say that, because they were fun. It's just the way that I was choosing, and many other people to play that game, it didn't coalesce with that way that you guys made that works so well, So this time around, what do you think?
It's a little bit like the endings I was just talking about.
Yeah.
Like, last time we also, with bosses, we had some issues. Like, our original vision was not to force you into combat, and but we had to make some choice. And actually, for all the people who were combat-oriented players, they enjoyed the experience, and they thought they were not too challenging. But for guys like you who were more kind of a stealthy or non-lethal kind of approach, then now it was a big slap in the face. And when you look at what we did with the Missing Link, which was the DLC we did for Human Revolution, you had a boss fight at the end, and that was totally consistent with the rest of the game. Like, you could continue to maintain your approach, and it was totally supported. When we revisited Human Revolution with the director's cut, we were also able to address the issue, minus the fact that you had to kill them, because, like you said, like the story and the cinematics, everything was there, and we couldn't change that. So, but in terms of flexibility for sneaky players or whatever the type you are, it was supported. And for Mankind Divided, you can be sure that you will have full-on flexibility, whether it's to be stealth, combat, lethal or non-lethal. So it was just a question that this time around, it was not like, oh my God, like what did we do wrong last time? No, we knew what we were doing wrong. It was like decisions that we had to make during production and towards the end of production, and this time around we didn't run into the same problems, and from day one we knew that we had to address it, and it was basically it was a non-issue because resources were put on it as soon as possible, and we knew what we had to do, and we did it with the other installments like Missing Link and Director's Cut. So,
and this time around, you know, the game has had several delays, but from what you're saying here, did those delays, those changes in time, does that allow you to not make those same, I guess, financial decisions and development decisions that you had to with the release of the first game?
No, I think those are totally unrelated. With Mankind Divided, the first, like, it took more time that originally we would have wished for. One of the first reasons that is very simple is that we switched engine at the beginning of the project, and more often than not, when you change technology, you always think you'll be able to rebuild the old game like quicker than you're able to do it. And technology is much more tricky today than it was maybe 15 years ago, and it takes time. And of course, it took time with Mankind Divided. It was no different than any other project in any other companies where there's a technology switch. And after that, the delay of because first it was announced for February 6 months ago, and now we're delaying it until August. At that point, it was just simply giving it the time to polish the game, to put the final touch, to balance it properly and everything. So it was nothing else than that. People sometimes will think, oh, they will take the extra time to add new content or things like that. It was not the case. The case was just like it's a new engine, like it was not reaching maturity until recently and everything, and now we had the proper time to play the game and make sure that we deliver the best product we can.
It just takes more time. Yes, indeed. I talked before about systems and how important it is, I think, at least for me as a player, to have these interesting systems that allow you to interact with it in different ways. Like I said before, I loved playing pacifist, completely non-lethal last time around. This time around, I've seen some gameplay with it, especially the stuff you had at E3. Seems to be a lot more options if I do want to play that way, and if I want to play more combat oriented.
Well, it was one of our goals when we started this project. It was to really look at combat and bring it on the same level of satisfaction as stealth. I mean, those two concepts are very different, right? They don't have the same benefits or the same satisfaction experience. Like, there are two different things. But with last game, combat was not necessarily the best part of the game. Stealth was really, really interesting. And we wanted to make sure that we were bringing combat on the same level as stealth as much as possible. Make it, if you decide to go that route, that it's a good experience. It's visceral. There are more possibilities, more. I would say a more tense experience and everything. So it was one of our focuses. But another thing that was also important with that is allowing flexibility in no matter what style you play, either it's stealth or combat. What I mean by that is, for example, in the last game, a lot of the tools, when I say tools, it's whether it's a weapon or an augmentation, the stealthy ones were oftentimes non-lethal, and the combat ones were oftentimes just lethal. And in our minds, it was like, well, maybe I want to fight, but it doesn't mean I want to kill. Or maybe I want to be sneaky, but it doesn't mean I want to be peaceful. And we wanted to make sure that this time around you can play combat and still maybe maintain your non-lethal approach, or maybe be a very stealth-oriented player and be a mass murderer. So it's your call, but
got to appeal to all sorts of players, right?
Exactly. It was just a question of trying to make the game more flexible to the different type of players, and not necessarily associating stealth with non-lethal and combat with lethal. It can be a mix of both. It can still be that, but
sure,
it doesn't have to be that. And that's why we have like the new gun arms that Jensen has, like those kind of concealed weapons in his arm that are non-lethal but can be used on the fly very quickly. But he also has like the blades that he can throw, but those are lethal. And everything. So it was a question of trying to bring more options to the mix that existed in the last game.
And looking at some of the footage that you've shown so far, you've had complete playthroughs. The feeling of fluidity is a lot stronger this time around. It seems like you've done away with some of the cumbersome sub-menus that you have to go in when you are engaged in combat or stealth. I love the mechanic of Adam Jensen just looking at his gun and making changes as things are happening. I think that's phenomenal. What other choices have you made to improve that sense of fluidity?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, because for us it was going to who Adam Jensen is in this new game. Like, if you remember in the Human Revolution, his famous tagline was, "I never asked for this." And back in those days, it was the story of a guy who, like, something happens to him and he tries to overcome like that event, and is trying to come to peace with his new body and everything. And in Mankind Divided, Adam Jensen, his tagline is more like at some point you have to let go and you need to embrace what you have become. And it's basically that. Like, he's the man 2.0, and he's a big he's kind of a weapon. He can make a difference. He has a lot of possibilities that most humans don't have, and everything. And so for us, when we look at that, it was Adam Jensen in this one is taking charge. Like, he accepted who he is, and is trying to use it in a good way. So it needs to be reflected in the gameplay as well. Jensen needs to be more fluid. It needs to be more someone that is in control, that is taking charge, that is being proactive, and he knows his stuff. So all that kind of reflection on those themes and the story arc of the character made us go into looking at his gun arms, because at first he had his gun arms, he had his other augmentations, and the selection wheel was the same as the last game, and we were, no, it can't be the same. It needs to be much more fluid. This guy is on the next level, and as a player, you should be able to play him and feel that you're more on the next level and you're not struggling as much as it was with the last game. So now we're able to assign augmentations on the D-pad on the controller. There's also the shoulder button that can be used. So therefore, it gives you 5 slots to put any augmentation there the way you want, according to your style, whatever. And you can just like be in the game, play shoot gun, or just stealth your way through environments, and just press on the D-pad or the shoulder button to use instantly, quickly, your augmentations, the ones that you prefer and you want to use all the time. So it makes for a much better experience, and so it allows to have this kind of 1-2 punch kind of experience. Now the fact also that in cover, Adam Jensen is able to not only move lateral, but he can also move from cover to cover in front of him. So it allows more flexibility to the experience. The fact also that in the last game, when you were in cover, you had to pull out of cover, perform a takedown on enemies, and then go back in cover. But this time around, you can be in cover, and when someone come close by, you can take them down instantly without having to pull out of cover, etc. All these things together, when you put them together, and also the overall control scheme for the experience. I was talking about D-pad shoulder, but everything, like the controller, the way it's used, it's much closer to most of the first-person shooter standards that we see today and everything. So it makes for a much more, I would say, easy to get in experience. And once you get the hold of the augmentations and everything, it's a really much easier game to play, much more fluid than it was on the Human Revolution.
Again, speaking with Jean-Francois, game director of Deus Ex, a lot of the improvements you mentioned, I love that the connection of why they're improved has a narrative focus. You know, Adam Jensen, it's a different perspective this time around. And not only is the character different, but the way that the character interacts with the world is different. And a lot of games don't really give you a reason why things have changed. It's just, oh, things have changed. It's a different game. We haven't spoke to the narrative yet about Mankind Divided. What exactly is the mechanical apartheid?
Well, for us, it's a term just to evoke an idea in the minds of people, because what we're talking about really it's segregation. It's a world like we're 2 years after the events of the Human Revolution, and by the end of the last game, someone like tried to control augmented citizen in the world, but he kind of perverted the chip that was installed in them, and they all went into a frenzy where they had hallucinations and they started to kill, have accidents and everything, and like millions of people died. So in Mankind Divided, we're 2 years after those events, and the dust is barely starting to settle. And now you have a world that is reacting to that event like in a very dramatic fashion. Now, as we can see in real life, when something bad happens, you always have like the kind of the black or white kind of mentality, like this is totally bad or this is totally good, but there's no gray zone, there's no in between. And now it's a world where it's trying to recollect itself, and now it sees augmented people as a danger for society. Like we just saw that big incident, that big catastrophe that happened in the last game. Like what tells us it's not going to happen again? And now you have places in the world that are starting to have more repressive laws. The racism is getting stronger. People are looking at augmented people, not trusting them, and they want to put them in ghettos and make sure that laws are passed so they're not in danger. On the other end, you have some augmented citizens that they're being oppressed, and sometimes they don't have like access to the right dialogue channels and everything, and some of them might go into extreme measures, things like that. So, and it can go on both sides of the conflict. So in the end, it's a world where people don't understand each other anymore, and they're demonizing a part of society, and therefore they're trying to put them in ghettos and things like that. So basically, that mechanical apartheid is just to express that idea in a very short fashion, not like the explanation I just gave to you.
Well, I love the fact that you're dealing with, you're wrestling with a theme that is so human in a video game, that is so relevant. You know, this game is set in the alternative universe, I think about 15, 30 years from now. But the themes you're talking about, you know, they're active around the globe, maybe not with the technology behind it, but these are things that people are dealing with. How do you create sympathy? Because even how you're describing now, I felt a sense of initial sympathy for some of the oppressors because of how it's manufactured. They can't trust. They had this huge incident where millions of people died.
Yeah.
How does that make the bad guys, quote unquote, a little more complex of characters?
That it's always been one of our goals, even with Human Revolution, and it's no different with Mankind Divided. Like we're trying to build a world where the human complexity is being portrayed. Like nothing. Even though sometimes as a society we deal with things like, especially in social medias or whatnot, in black or white. Like when someone says something that is offensive, then now everybody goes against that person and, oh my God, it's the end of the world kind of thing. But when you just look at individuals, like the human beings we are, we're most of us were very complex, so we're hard to follow. Sometimes we're predictable, sometimes we're not. We have paradox. We don't always live by what we say and things like that. And sometimes we have our own personal agendas. It doesn't mean that we're evil or we have bad intentions, but we all kind of have different motivations in life. And that's something that in the characters and factions we're building, we're trying to portray that as well. Like, people sometimes do bad things. Sometimes people do good things. And sometimes the people who are doing the good things don't necessarily have a very good motivation or a very selfish motivation. You can have maybe a very selfish motivation to do something good, and you have some people who do things in a bad way, but what they're trying to achieve within them might be even more like kind of good at heart. It's just that sometimes people are totally they don't have the tools to do it the right way, depending of where they're coming from or whatever, like the education they had. Mm-hmm. So we're just trying to give life to that complexity in some fashion, and therefore what you see in the game, it's never black or white. It's never evil against good. No, it's about human beings trying to cope with a world that is not necessarily always welcoming.
And in this sea of ambiguity, of different motivations, of different thoughts and ideas, of different philosophical slants, where are we as Adam Jensen, or what are we in this world exactly?
Right. Well, Adam Jensen, now he works for an organization called Task Force 29. It's a subdivision of Interpol, an anti-terrorist group. And his basic goal is to try to bring a bit of peace to that world that is going more into a chaotic state and everything. But at the same time, Adam Jensen also has this personal quest that with the last game he couldn't finish. Like, he never asked for this. Of course, now he went to the next level, but he's still looking for the people behind the curtain, the people in the shadows that are trying to steer society in different directions and that are creating that kind of chaotic world state, and he's trying to get at them to stop them. And he believes that Task Force 29, this Interpol division, has some links or some connections to the Illuminati, to the people in the shadows, and he tries to get at them while trying to repair some of the bad stuff that happened with last game and try to make the world a little bit of a better place.
So a very lofty starting point, I imagine, that could be filled with a lot of disillusionment if he makes the wrong choice.
Of course, and also what we're always trying to do is to put Adam Jensen / the player in the middle of this, and we're trying to keep things as neutral as possible and let the players decide what they believe and what's right and what's not right, etc. So because in the end, what we like to do is to bring some questions to the table, but I wouldn't be arrogant to say I'm smart enough to offer you answers, because that's not my place, and it's to players to experience their own take on what we're asking, the questions we're putting on the table, and we let them have this journey, and hopefully they will have a good experience with the game, but at the same time, hopefully it will make them think on various levels, and if just that, I would be happy.
Well, yeah, kind of speaking to that, what do you think and hope that a story like this that deals with the ambiguities of thought and oppression and tolerance, what do you think, or hope rather, that players will be able to learn from this sort of story? Because it does seem like you're setting heights. It's going to be fun. It's going to be entertaining. It's going to be interesting. But it seems like there is some type of important message that a player could glean from all this.
Well, I try to stay away from the message, because I'm not a demagogue, and I'm not trying to tell people necessarily something. But I like to explore themes that have has a big value on a human level, and I like to put questions on the table and have people make their own minds about it. I have my opinion, but I don't think it's my opinion in there that is relevant. It's more what players are going to get out of this.
Very interesting. Again, speaking with Jean-Francois, game director of Deus Ex. He's been speaking to us for a while now. I just wanted to jump into, before I let you go, because you've been very gracious, the idea of the world we'll be exploring. And I know this time around you are making some changes. We got to see some of it, and my God, does it look dense.
It looks what?
Very dense, very, very dense of the different things you can do. Just from what we saw in E3, the different layers, the different options. Tell us a little bit about the world, the different locales we'll be interacting with in Mankind Divided.
Your impression is not just an impression. You are right. I mean, I'm not going to talk about all the locations, but one of the things that we wanted to focus on, speaking of locations and how we would explore them, we wanted to bring more verticality to level design. Verticality for exploration, having more routes, more options, but also the fact that when you're stealthy, or even if you're in combat, having enemies on various levels, it changes also the experience. And some of the enemies will have a lot of the same augmentations as you have, and therefore they might be able to jump on other levels and things like that. So it's going to change the dynamic of gameplay. So in terms of navigation in the world, verticality was a big part. The other part is that we wanted to make sure that the experience within the levels would be as rich as possible, and therefore, for example, especially when you're in a city hub like Prague, you can meet a lot of people, you can have a lot of side missions, there's a lot of show don't tell content in those environments, in which, like, we don't have necessarily have an objective locator on them for you to, this is this and this is that. No, you have some of the optional stuff that you have to connect the dots by yourself, and it tells different stories. And even some characters can maybe just appear if you connected those dots and everything, and you collected this and you figured out like the hint, it was leading you somewhere else, and then when you get there, you're able to talk on a messenger kind of thing on a computer and be able to meet with someone that otherwise you would never meet in the game. Or things like side missions, the way we build them this time around, they feel also in the themes that we explore in the critical path, and also some of the things you do in these missions can have some sort of influence also on the critical path. But we build them by layers, meaning that depending on how you play those side missions, what you discover or what you don't discover might make you go into this small story that is 10, 15 minutes, and like you just got the gist of what's going on and you got some sort of conclusion, and okay, that's fine. Or you can start to dig deeper and discover that there's much more than meets the eye, and you can discover a bigger, deeper story and get involved and have a really big impact on it. So that's how we try to build the world of Mankind Divided, like making you experience a lot of things, way more than in the last game. So I would say that the game, it's much, like you said, denser than what we did previously. There's more content at every corner than we had before. It doesn't mean that we have like 300 side quests or whatever, but it's just a question that everything is more fleshed out, everything has more depth to it. There's a lot. I'm trying to stay as vague as possible to not spoil anything.
Well, we're almost there, right? We're almost here.
I'm trying to answer your question.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Jean-Francois, game director of Deus Ex. Mankind Divided, when's it coming out?
August 23rd.
All right. And finally, you've had so much time with this game. What do you think is your favorite? The thing that when you play the game or you talk about the game that you get most excited about, that is a new addition that you need fans to know about because it's that, big?
Well, we have one big new feature that is not inside the game itself. It's called Breach. and it's a new gameplay mode that will complement the single player campaign, and it's a challenge mode that also has a narrative aspect that ties back to the world of the FX and connects to the game as a whole. And it also has a social component that allows you to challenge some friends, and you have leaderboards so you can climb up or go down the leaderboards. Like you, even though it's single player, that social component allow you to add modifiers here and there on the maps and send the challenge to your friend. And if your friend accepts and it beats the challenge, he gets the points, and if he fails, you get the points, kind of thing. So
cool.
There's this really complementary experience to the main game once you're done with it, or before getting to it, whatever. And for us, it was a way to give a more arcade twist to the basic gameplay pillars of combat and stealth, and how you play with augmentations and things like that. So it's really fun. It's really like, it's kind of like bite-sized kind of experience, and it's very interesting. So we didn't speak about it, but that complements the main game, and it's going to be our first live mode that we're going to add content after the release of the game, and also tweak the values if need be, and things like that.
Sounds like a great way for me to play with these systems that I love so much. Jean-Francois, thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure. Have a good day.
This is Andy Burkowski, VGS Talk Radio, AM 640.